Okay, again, thank you for joining us for the August Gait Equity webinar. This is our summer session. I'm Bonnie Zimmerman, Program Specialist with System and School Improvement at OSPI, and today's topic is Attendance 201, Engaging Families Through Attendance Cafes. Our objectives are to learn a strategy to connect with families through hosting attendance community cafes, learn from a school improvement coach how they are supporting attendance in Washington schools, and get resources to get started. We're joined by Kristi Johnson, Attendance Program Supervisor here at OSPI, and Kathryn Page. She's one of our continuous improvement partners. At OSPI, we envision all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. And did you know we have an OSPI YouTube channel? Our webinars are posted on the YouTube channel. If you want great ideas from Washington schools, you should definitely subscribe. OSPI has developed an equity statement that we think helps frame our webinars. We believe each student, family, and community possesses strengths and cultural knowledge that benefit their peers, educators, and schools. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of System and School Improvement. Next month, our webinars are about school climate. The 101 will be about behavior supports, and in the afternoon, we will have someone from the field from one of our schools also share about behavior supports. And we've reached our first polling question in the chat. Can you tell us what's one strategy you use to gather your family's feedback? While you're sharing the one strategy you use to gather families' feedback, I'd like to introduce Kristi Johnson, Attendance Program Supervisor at OSPI. Kristi will talk to us about the importance of engaging families around student attendance.
Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for either rejoining us if you were with us this morning or joining us anew. I know that you're maybe taking time right now to enter into the chat some of those strategies for working with families. If you haven't introduced yourself, please feel free to also enter your name and role in the chat as well. We love hearing that. So this morning, if you were not able to attend the first webinar, you missed some of the things that we talked about were just some basics about attendance. We talked about definitions and reporting, research, data, and some best practices. And then we heard some really powerful relaying of the work that Vancouver Public Schools is doing around attendance, including their focus on equity and really digging into their data, their district-wide approach. They've developed a principals toolkit after talking to over, I think, 400 of their families, and they've got some really cool tiered approaches from their prize patrol and all the way up to their re-engagement boards that they do even in the elementary school for families. Hope you get a chance to listen to that recording when it's available. And today I'm so excited to talk about attendance community cafes. I want to quickly just go over a couple of things. So this morning I talked about, the number of reasons, the wide variety of reasons that students might be absent. And looking at this slide again and thinking about all these reasons really highlights for me the critical importance of engaging our families and community partners and the people working in our schools, no matter what role, to really understand their perspectives and their experiences around attendance. I also talked this morning about how districts and schools have seen success in ensuring regular attendance through this framework of multi-tiered systems of support. So right there in the middle at the top, today we're really honing in on a family engagement strategy. And I think this is especially critical when in our state, schools are required to follow these set steps regarding truancy. And it's so important that we put the front end work into partnering with families so that if when a letter gets sent home about attendance or truancy or a call is made home, it's not the first time that parents are hearing from us. So here are some of the reasons that I think family and community are key in addressing attendance. They know their own experience. They know what barriers that they face. They know their own culture and can help educate administrators and staff and educators around their culture. They can help make sure that we're communicating to them in their own language. They know what their historical experience has been in school and what their students' experience is in school. They also may know about different resources in the community that school folks might not know about. So, and I think it's just to say we as educators and administrators, we don't have all the answers and we don't have to. So families are a great resource for expanding our knowledge about the community. I am super excited to hand it over to Kathryn Page, who is here to really dive into the strategy of attendance cafes. I was so lucky to be able to participate in an attendance cafe that Kathryn led in Toppenish a couple of months ago. We had the district leadership team in attendance. Attendance clerks were invited from across the district and inclusion specialists. And we had such a rich discussion. I'm excited to do another one. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kathryn after we do this poll. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kathryn Page. Kathryn, take it away.
So hello and welcome to this portion of the presentation today. I'm honored to have been asked by Kristi to present on a topic I'm really passionate about, learning how to apply the concept of community cafes to benefit student attendance is something really any school can do or any organization. It literally costs you nothing. The knowledge gained from engaging communities in those conversations that matter, it really will make you wonder why you haven't done it before, and you'll be asking when you can schedule your next cafe. By the end of this presentation today, you will have resources you can access, including various websites and books if you want to learn more about any of the content presented. So who am I and where am I from? My name is Kathryn Page. I currently work with 4 school districts in my role as a continuous improvement partner for Office of System and School Improvement. My previous experience was as an administrator for 19 years, kind of dating myself, at the elementary and middle school level. I was also lucky enough to serve as a special education director, and I started my career as a special education teacher in an elementary school. So before we go into a definition for community cafes, I really like to lead with what is truly the core of what a community cafe represents. The knowledge, wisdom, and solutions we are searching for are already present in the room. So I wonder from all of you, have you ever worked in a building or a district or for a department or business that thought the answer was out there and they needed an expert, a consultant, or a magic curriculum, maybe a silver bullet to fix the issue? I've seen it personally time and time again, but I need to be honest, I've yet to be in a situation where the answers weren't already in the room. If we would only take the time to look, what I say is within, you will be pleasantly surprised at the knowledge and all those resources you will find in your school building or your district, as well as your school and your business community. So community cafes, what is one? Or what is an attendance cafe? A definition I like is brought to us from New York Parenting Education Partnership. However, the one addition I would make to this definition, our benefit today, is to think of them as a model for not only parent voice. The community cafes are a series of guided conversations, and they're using the World Cafe model. And you will receive that resource later in the presentation. Participants use carefully structured questions to guide meaningful conversations, allowing individuals from diverse cultural, socioeconomic, and educational backgrounds to engage in discussions that increase community wisdom, build parent voice, and facilitate action to improve the lives of children. What I like best about these cafes is they produce what I call a harvest, which is a report that captures the discussion and serves as a tool to facilitate communication within and between communities. And so when you collect and synthesize that cafe harvest with all the community level perspectives, concerns, and goals, they can be shared. They can be shared with your state leaders. They can be shared with your school district, with your teachers, depending on what type of a cafe you're holding. If you could walk away from a meeting with the following comments, would you believe it was a success? These comments came from a recent attendance cafe that Kristi was talking about that brought together the community of attendance clerks from all schools within a school district. This was just a small sample. We have good ideas. We need to unify across the district. I am committing to educating families and building relationships based on concern rather than compliance. Be positive in response to student absences. Be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Attendance is not a surface level issue, but a deeper problem with not one root cause or one solution. And we need to make school a place they want to be successful. There needs to be a sense of belonging and community. So in this particular district, we chose to hold an attendance cafe. However, know that the sky is the limit for the kinds of cafes and the audiences to invite. At one school, I held one for a parent group with concerns about the health curriculum. That one cafe turned into a monthly cafe where parents had the opportunity to gather and discuss the American school system, as the parent group was from Somalia and many of the families were new to the US school system. The cafe actually from that one turned into an opportunity for parents to come to a staff meeting and answer questions staff had but were too afraid to ask. To this day, I still believe it was the best use of the staff meeting time ever, and the staff also said the same thing. It was enlightening to see how the dominant culture was misreading the actions of parents and had created what I call a single story that wasn't correct. I really want to take this opportunity to share with you something that relates perfectly to what I was just saying. I highly, highly, highly recommend watching this TED Talk. It would be a great beginning of the year video to visit the danger of the single story. This novelist tells the story of how she found her authentic cultural voice and warns that if we hear only a single story about another person or country, we risk a critical misunderstanding. I have found that community cafes or attendance cafes and the process of digging down to discover root cause, it forces us out of the trap of that single story. I would ask, what single story are we sharing about attendance in our schools? Could there be more stories? And bringing the community, the parents and guardians of our students to the table in a caring and safe environment can shed light on some of our faulty beliefs. Consider that single story with any issue you are exploring. So let's take a step back to see why we even went down the path of a cafe in this district. Why did this district examine attendance? They started down the road of creating a multi-tiered system of supports, also known as MTSS, for all their students for academics, behavior, and social emotional. The first tiered system they were interested in developing was based on student attendance. After all, if students weren't at school, they wouldn't have access to the learning. A data dive using Laura Lipton's data-driven dialogue or collaborative learning cycles was used for this dive. Root cause analysis revealed some questions, or what I call hunches. The cafe was one of the methods we used to gather more information to inform our action. It ended up revealing more than we could have ever anticipated. Imagine what happens when you actually give the people involved in the topic the time and the space to share their opinions and their knowledge and their insight. I can guarantee you that you'll never be disappointed with a cafe. So we went through a systematic approach for uncovering root cause for attendance. The first hunch we had was about relationships. The hunch was that students didn't have a caring adult at school to go to if needed. They weren't connected to the school. Another hunch we had was regarding how attendance was recorded and the lack of training that was being provided. Schools weren't operating off the same page of music. In order for us to learn more about the relationships and the procedures, we went directly to the attendance clerks for answers. To sum up our next steps, we used root cause analysis to examine the data, identified our hunches, and decided to hold an attendance cafe to learn more. We also decided to invite Kristi Johnson, the resident expert on attendance that you just heard from. So she came to Toppenish from the state for our cafe that day. She presented to a group of probably about 40 individuals, maybe 50, prior to us starting the cafe. So what were some themes we noticed after using that root cause analysis strategy? Well, relationships was a big one. The hunch was that students weren't connected to school through caring adults. Communication was an issue. We were in the business of compliance, possibly, instead of care. The tone of our parent letters, well, it wasn't friendly. The reading level of the parent letters was probably at about a 12th grade level. Staff didn't know what the term regular attender meant or what was considered chronic absenteeism. And if our staff didn't know this, how could our school community? So we weren't aware of all the barriers the students were encountering relating to attendance. And there was a need for training, and there wasn't a tiered response for attendance in the district. In the book, Transforming Schools Through Systems Change, this quote speaks to the issues and the need to do everything in our power to get away from the one-way communication model with our parents and community. What we're looking at is a transformation of a system. Administrators at struggling schools may say, we have to improve communication with parents, but typically the communication they're referring to is one way. They might say to parents, your child has only 10 credits. What are you going to do about it? Well, parents don't know the answer, and neither do schools. And all too often, leaders inform parents about their child's failures rather than asking parents to help them understand the student better and offering systems that will support the child. So when you begin planning your cafe, I suggest using something such as this. I developed a planning document that allows you to sit with a small team and think through all of the details so you have a successful cafe. This has proven to be helpful as it covers all aspects of it and divides up the responsibilities. You will want one table host for each table. It is that team of hosts, or what I call harvesters, that would gather to complete this planning guide. So location, location, location is what they say. Think about where to hold your community cafe or your attendance cafe. School may seem like the obvious choice, but it really isn't. If you're meeting with parents or specific parent groups in your school community, it might just be best to travel to them. What about a cafe at a local park, community center, library? The options, well, they're limitless. The message being sent to the participants when you do this is that we care. So ask your parent leaders within your school for their thoughts on the best location to hold a cafe. I've included some of the questions we used in an attendance cafe. The questions were placed on a shared drive, and each table host, the person harvesting the information who is recording responses, records those responses on that live document. You can see at the end that we were asking for additional topics because this is our setup for future cafes. So when you look at, let's say, number 5, what do you think is the root cause of attendance issues for our youth in whatever school district? And then giving the definition of what root cause is. That was a particularly helpful question to ask. And number 6 was as well, what would be one step we could take to improve student attendance? And number 7, perhaps my favorite, in what ways in my role do I impact or influence students' attendance? So setting the stage. Setting the stage for the cafe is really quite simple. A communication that you see on the left side of your screen was created, translated into languages spoken in the district. Committee members reached out personally to invite people as well. The tables were set up to not have more than 4 people. Remember that one of the seats is for the table host, who is simply asking the questions and recording the dialogue. I do recommend that if you're holding a staff cafe in a school district, have the table host be someone who is not at the school of the participants. We always want the participants to feel comfortable sharing what is on their mind. At this particular cafe, there were name tags for people to make with a place for each table member to share what their biggest desire was for their students in the school district. A variety of pens and pencils were available, and of course, there were treats. In this case, we met really early in the morning, actually not really early, after attendance was taken. And so we had another table where there were donuts located to the side, and it was also near the sign-in sheet. The questions were also in a hard copy format at each table. So what we see at an actual cafe is small groups of participants gathered around a table. The person who is harvesting is only asking clarifying questions and making sure he or she has captured the responses accurately. It is best if you can cover tables with butcher paper and provide those pens, colored pencils, etc., so that when the questions are asked, participants can write their responses, or they can take notes or even doodle so they can recall their thoughts when it is their turn. The time involved in a cafe really depends on your topic. For some cafes, I have invited a guest speaker to present for approximately 30 minutes, and then we move into a cafe based on the information presented. So a cafe can really take anywhere from 30 minutes to hours if you wanted to, depending on your group and the number of questions. I have held them where participants bring food to share, or I've also provided treats. The idea is to make that environment comfortable. Have music playing as they enter to sign in and get their name tags. Have someone at that sign-in table to greet and welcome your cafe participants. After all, they're taking their time to join you. Also, have someone there at that sign-in table to escort children to a location in the room where there are games, crayons, maybe materials for crafts. I have invited high school students before to assist at that table, and they can usually earn some type of a credit for volunteer work. So high schools have been really great with partnering with me when I've held cafes, and the benefits of it, like I've said before, are immense. So just like in staff meetings, professional learning communities, department meetings, there are norms that are addressed by the host. So there is somebody that is hosting it, that is up front and center, and that person does share what the norms are at the beginning. These norms that you see here come from a great book called The Surprising Power of Liberating Structures: Simple Rules to Unleash a Culture of Innovation. You will also find various norms in the free resources that are provided at the end of this presentation, but I do really recommend this book. So this is an example of that harvest and of what happened at the end of an attendance cafe. We captured commitments and the biggest takeaway, or aha, for the day. Now, this was separate from what was recorded at those tables. We wanted actually to have those two parting questions. So before we ended the cafe, each table reported out to the large group about their biggest takeaway. As the host or facilitator, then I gathered all of the responses to questions in a single form, and I sent it out to all the cafe participants with pictures and a thank you for their thoughtful responses. At that time, I also let them know to expect to hear from us again with next steps. They were told that the team would be reviewing the responses to develop an action steps. Once those action steps were identified, the cafe participants, they were communicated with again. We literally created an attendance committee that had approximately 40 to 50 people. Pretty amazing, if you ask me. And that was just one audience. I want to stress, and I really, really want to re-stress this, the importance of honoring the good work and the time put forth by all those participants. They need to see that this was not just an activity. They need to be communicated with as plans move forward. They must see their recommendations being honored. This will build relationships and trust. In fact, probably one of the last things I did this year before everyone went home is sent one more email to that group to outline the action steps and that we had taken all of their information in and we had actually done something with it. So when you host that community cafe or even start examining root cause, please consider what Brookfield says about practicing critical reflection through an equity lens. If I was holding a cafe with my staff, I would consider these questions or consider using them at the beginning of a year when you are reviewing the data. Simply ask your team, department, or staff these questions to see what responses you receive before looking at the data. So how many assumptions do we make about absenteeism? That is a really important question. I usually use that one. Honestly, it's just a question you put out there without any data up, and you collect and harvest all those assumptions. And then number 2, are there alternative perspectives? And number 3, what is the influence of the dominant cultural values? We heard a bit about that when we talked about the single story. So final advice for beginning this work, I will always say this: place your attendance data next to your achievement data. And what does it reveal? consider holding that cafe with an audience that can assist with informing you about your hunches. Finally, I provided links for creating a 45-day plan. In this particular district, we will actually be meeting every 30 days at the district level to monitor progress with data and make adjustments as needed. And once again, this attendance cafe was held with attendance clerks. It was held with counselors, instructional specialists, and administrators. Other cafes that I've held that have been very powerful are, I'm going to say, student cafes. A really powerful strategy is, especially at the beginning of the year, is to go to that first grade you have in either a middle school or a junior high. As an elementary principal, travel to that middle school. Find your students that went to that middle school. Sit down, bring your team with you, and have those students reflect on their elementary school experience and what would have made it better for them. You get some powerful information out of that. Also, I would say at the high school level, very powerful to ask those ninth graders, let's reflect on middle school. What went really well? If you could change something, what would it be? So what? And what happened from all of these cafes? A tiered system of supports was developed by the school district. In fact, they started in January, and I think they had this system in place by June. And it really was involved an MTSS leadership team at the district level. We worked once a month for 6 hours a day to really create that tiered system. We had Kristi on the phone quite a bit. And the district designed an attendance nudge letter based on a study out of Harvard and UC Berkeley. So the level of text and the tone and the visual of that letter was addressed. And this year, all students will share the letter with their parents twice during the school year at the student-led conferences, and this is K-12. But the letter can be actually generated at any time. In fact, they are running copies of all of the nudge letters right now for their first weeks of school, and the information on those nudge letters will be based off of last year. So those students are going to see their nudge letters and be able to understand that they are going to be the ones explaining what that looks like and setting goals for themselves. Also, what happened was a short survey was created for all students in the district to identify the number of students who didn't feel like they had connected with a caring adult at that school. That is something that is going to be given to second graders through 12th graders. And then also, honestly, then at that first semester for high school, for those ninth graders, they'll wait one semester and then they will go ahead and administer that really short 2 to 3 question survey. And then for middle school, of course, it will be after that first semester. And what they're going to do is from that, if they have students that answer not yet for not having a caring adult to go to at school, well, those students right away are going to become tier 2 for social emotional. We're going to be looking at those caring relationships. And so a very easy way for us to get at what we think could be part of the issue. The training for the attendance clerks also was planned and delivered. In fact, it was delivered actually on Monday because I was there to see that. And I would say that the process used to identify root cause and check on it through our attendance cafe, it resulted in many, many positive steps. And it actually uncovered things that we did not expect. So I promised you that there would be a link to a free resource for setting up cafes. However, remember to make each one of those your own because every community is unique. And these websites provide you with a great deal of information. The top 2 have guides you can download about different types of cafes. And remember, cafes are excellent to gather or harvest additional information about the barriers to attendance. They're also powerful for many other topics. The bottom link will take you to Office of System and School Improvements page full of links to resources. The Powerless to Powerful link will provide you with PowerPoints, videos, manuals about creating a system, because that's really what we're looking at here is a system based on a conceptual framework. That framework includes academic press, relational trust, and social support. It is your how-to guide on developing 45-day plans of action to make that difference. So I would suggest reading Powerless to Powerful and Transforming Schools Through Systems Change, because we all know that attendance impacts all aspects of school: academics, behavior, and social emotional. These are some of the books I have found especially beneficial to my work with cafes. As I just mentioned, there's Powerless to Powerful, Transforming Schools are ones I find critical to creating the change needed in systems. The Resource Guide for the World Cafe, that is the second one on the top from the left. It's simply awesome. It provides you with step-by-step considerations. But know this, they will be different based on your topics and your population and your style. And that is just totally okay. Use the resources as a guide because you will know best. So as we near the end of this presentation, I need to say to please don't hesitate to reach out if you have further questions, or honestly, you just want to share a success story. I'd love to hear from all of you on how the community cafes or attendance cafes are impacting your community and what you learned from them. I would recommend, consider, we worked with our attendance clerks, but then we'll need to be working with our families, bringing our families in. But I'm going to tell you the most powerful cafes I've ever held were with students. So I will end my time with you today with a quote from Margaret Weekly. There's no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. My best wishes to all of you as you create your own versions of community cafes. I would tell you to be really bold and brave and be intentional with staying away from that single story. Practice critical reflection through the equity lens and honor the knowledge and experiences brought to the schools by your community. But say, once again, I'll end it how I kind of started it, which is look within. You will find the answers in your school communities. So I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me today.
Okay, now we're going to do another poll. It's our Gait Evaluation. We like to get more information from our audience about our webinars, so we're going to run this evaluation as a poll. Thank you for letting us know what you think. If something comes to you later, you can also have the option of sharing your thoughts through our web evaluation, which is linked on our webinar reminders.
I want to take a second to remind folks that September is Attendance Awareness Month. A couple of things for you to know. OSPI has some materials that you can order for free. We are in the process of fulfilling orders that were placed in June, hoping to get those to you as soon as possible. And then starting in September, you'll be able to order them again. Please sign up for the attendance newsletter. Send out some regular updates and resources through that. And lastly, if your district, like Toppenish, has made attendance a district-wide priority, consider getting your superintendent to sign up for the National Superintendent's Call to Action and make it known. Thank you for filling out the evaluation. Thank you for joining us today.
So another resource we've developed is the green button. We want you to be able to contact a real-life person here at OSPI to help answer any questions you might have. Again, Kristi Johnson, I'm Bonnie Zimmerman, Kathy Anderson, our Graduation Equity Program Supervisor, who is the person responsible for these wonderful webinars. Our contact information is there. Kathryn Page, we really, really appreciate her being with us, and I believe we've provided her contact information in the chat. I know she'd be willing to help you. We like to give credit where it's due. If you'd like an image from the Gait Equity webinar, we use images that are in the Creative Commons or are tagged with their individual permissions. And as we wrap up today, we want to encourage you to take a minute, reflect on the webinar, and discuss these questions. And thank you for joining us at the Gait Equity webinar. We'll see you next month. Remember that to register for the 2019-2020 school year Gait Equity webinars, it's a different link than the one used today. So go to our website, sign up for the Gait Equity webinar series for 2019-2020.